The moment I walked into my sister's wedding, her new husband, Kyle, pointed at me with a smirk and said, "Surprised they invited the family disgrace." My face burned with humiliation as guests whispered behind me. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I'm Tessa, and what he didn't know was that I had secrets that could turn his perfect day into chaos. Lila, my sister, had always been jealous of me, but seeing her laugh at my shame cut deeper than Kyle's words. I realized I wasn't just hurt, I was betrayed by my own family. Memories of our childhood flashed in my mind. We used to share everything, laugh together, and protect each other. But greed and envy had changed her. After the wedding, I decided I wouldn't stay silent. I quietly collected proof of Kyle's lies and Lila's manipulation. Financial records, messages, and hidden details showed the truth they wanted to bury. I confided in my best friend, Marin, who reminded me to stay calm and patient. Revenge wasn't about anger, it was about exposing the truth. Months later, during a family gathering, I revealed everything. Guests were shocked. Kyle stammered, and Lila turned pale. Their perfect image shattered, and I felt a quiet satisfaction. It wasn't cruelty, it was justice. Finally, I focused on myself. I rebuilt my life, found peace, and surrounded myself with people who valued honesty. The family disgrace? That title no longer belonged to me. It was their loss, not mine. I always thought Lila and I were inseparable. Growing up, we shared secrets, dreams, and even our little victories. But the moment she met Kyle, everything shifted. The sister I trusted became someone I barely recognized. At first, I didn't notice. I thought her coldness was temporary, just wedding stress. But slowly, I realized she had been quietly turning our family against me. Invitations disappeared, plans were made without me, and little lies spread about my character. I was painted as reckless, unstable, and unworthy of love or respect. Kyle's cruel comment at the wedding wasn't an isolated insult, it was confirmation of a much deeper betrayal. I couldn't understand how someone so close could hurt me so deliberately. Every memory of childhood laughter now felt tainted by her envy. Family dinners, holidays, even simple phone calls had become minefields. Everyone around me seemed to accept her version of the story, leaving me feeling isolated and invisible. It wasn't just embarrassment I felt, it was heartbreak. The people I had trusted the most had turned against me. The sister I had protected, comforted, and celebrated had become the source of my pain. The betrayal cut deeper than any insult or humiliation ever could. Yet even in the pain, a spark of resolve ignited inside me. I knew I couldn't let this betrayal define me. Their actions wouldn't break me. I began quietly thinking about the steps I would take, not in anger, but to reclaim my dignity and show them that their manipulations wouldn't control my life. The hurt was real, but so was my determination. And this was only the beginning of my story. As a child, Lila and I were inseparable. We built forts in the backyard, whispered our dreams at night, and swapped clothes when we wanted to feel each other's style. Life felt simple, and I always believed we would protect each other no matter what. But things began to change after our grandmother passed away. She left me a small inheritance, nothing extravagant, just a few keepsakes and savings she had tucked away. I thought it was a gesture of love, but Lila saw it differently. Instead of celebrating, she grew quiet and distant, her smiles tinged with resentment. Slowly, I realized she had begun spreading whispers about me. "Tessa is spoiled," she would say casually to our relatives. "She only thinks about herself," she told friends. Her envy was subtle but sharp, planting doubts in everyone's mind. I felt the shift before anyone even acknowledged it. Family gatherings that used to be full of laughter became tense. I was no longer her sister in their eyes, I was competition. Even as I tried to reach out, to remind her of the bond we shared, Lila kept her distance. Every kind gesture I offered was met with coldness or a veiled criticism. I began to notice patterns, how she twisted small incidents to make me seem selfish, how she manipulated opinions to her favor. By the time her wedding arrived, that tiny seed of jealousy had grown into a wildfire. It consumed her ability to see me as family, replaced by a desire to dominate, humiliate, and erase my place in our lives. Kyle's cruel words at the ceremony weren't random, they were the culmination of years of quietly nurtured envy. I understood then that betrayal often begins in silence, grows in shadows, and strikes when you least expect it. The wedding felt like a trap from the moment I arrived. Kyle's words had been shocking, but they were just the beginning. As the reception continued, he found ways to poke at me during speeches, twisting jokes that seemed harmless to others but cut me deeply. I could feel the room shifting, eyes darting between us, whispers growing louder with every sly remark. Lila didn't stop him either. She laughed at his comments, as if our shared history meant nothing. The sister I had loved and trusted was now complicit in publicly humiliating me. Each smile they directed at me wasn't friendly, it was a silent confirmation that I was their target. The decorations, the music, even the laughter around me all blurred into a haze of shame. I could hear someone mention my name, smothered in ridicule, and I wanted to disappear. It wasn't simply embarrassment, it was a deliberate attack on my character, designed to show the world that I didn't belong there. Every glance from Kyle felt like a challenge, and every chuckle from Lila felt like a betrayal sharpened into a weapon. I realized this wasn't about a single moment of cruelty, it was the culmination of months, even years, of hidden resentment and envy. Their careful planning had turned what should have been a joyful day into a display of my supposed failings. Yet beneath the sting, something ignited in me, a quiet determination. I wouldn't allow their cruelty to break me. I could feel the first flicker of resolve forming, the thought that perhaps one day, the balance of power would shift, and I would reclaim what they had stolen from me, my dignity, my voice, and my place in the family. I stepped out of the wedding into the cool night air, my chest tight and my mind racing. The noise and laughter inside felt distant, almost unreal, as if I had left one world and entered another. Humiliation burned, but beneath it, a quiet clarity began to form. For the first time, I understood that what I had felt at the wedding wasn't just anger, it was the spark of resolve. Revenge didn't mean shouting or confronting them in public. It meant uncovering the lies, revealing the truth, and reclaiming control over my own story. Kyle and Lila had thought they could humiliate me and rewrite reality, but I knew better. I replayed every insult, every whispered comment, every mocking glance. They believed they had all the power, that I was powerless and isolated. But power could shift. I could be strategic, patient, and deliberate. Their arrogance had blinded them to the fact that I wasn't the person they thought I was. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, making mental notes. Evidence, witnesses, timing, it all mattered. I didn't want to act recklessly. I wanted their deception exposed in a way that left no room for denial. That night, as the streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement, I made a decision. I would take back my dignity. I would protect myself from further betrayal. And when the time was right, I would ensure that Kyle and Lila understood that their actions had consequences. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of purpose. Their betrayal would no longer define me. Instead, it would fuel a plan that would restore my place in the family and show them the strength they had underestimated in me. In the weeks after the wedding, I became careful, deliberate, and patient. I couldn't afford mistakes, so I moved quietly, observing and collecting everything I could. Every conversation, every document, every overlooked detail mattered. I dug through old letters, notes, and messages that Lila thought no one would ever see. Little by little, patterns emerged, hidden manipulations, exaggerations, and deliberate lies. I realized that what they had built so confidently was fragile. Kyle's self-assured arrogance became his blind spot. In casual boasts or careless remarks, he revealed inconsistencies about his past, stories that didn't add up, and promises he never kept. Even small financial records offered clues. Unexplained transactions and missing details hinted at deceptions Lila had worked hard to hide. I kept everything organized, documenting each piece so that nothing could be dismissed or denied. Every bit of evidence strengthened my resolve, transforming frustration into strategy. As I reviewed the information, I began to see the full picture. Their web of lies wasn't just about me, it extended to family and friends, twisting perceptions to serve their image. But the more I uncovered, the more confident I became. They had underestimated my persistence, assuming silence meant weakness. Every discovery gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in months. I no longer felt powerless or humiliated. Instead, I felt a quiet determination building inside me. Every secret, every lie, every omission became a tool. I wasn't acting out of anger alone, I was preparing a careful, undeniable case that would expose the truth and ensure that their betrayal could no longer hide in the shadows. By the time I finished gathering evidence, I knew one thing: when the moment came, there would be no excuses, no denials, and no way for them to escape accountability. The first step of my plan had to be careful. I didn't want drama or raised voices. I wanted the truth to speak for itself. So I approached family members one by one, choosing moments when the conversation could stay private and calm. I didn't accuse anyone. I simply presented what I had found and let the facts settle. The bank statements were the starting point. I showed how certain transactions didn't match the stories Kyle had told. Quiet questions about missing amounts led to raised eyebrows. Then I brought out the documents related to the wedding, contracts that revealed hidden details Lila had kept from everyone, including decisions she pretended were made by others. Each piece added clarity, and I watched as confusion spread across the faces of those who had trusted them so easily. I didn't push anyone to take sides. I only asked them to look closely. The moment they began connecting the dots on their own, I knew the shift had begun. Kyle's story suddenly looked shaky. Lila's explanations sounded rehearsed. The people they relied on for approval started to question things they once accepted without hesitation. With every quiet conversation, their shine dulled. Relatives who used to admire them began sharing concerns with each other. Long-held assumptions about their honesty started to crumble. I could feel the change in the air, subtle, but powerful. Their image, once polished and admired, now showed cracks. Everything they had built on charm and deception was beginning to fall apart, not because I shouted or stirred chaos, but because honesty had finally entered the room. And this was only the first step. The truth had more to reveal, and I was ready to let it unfold at its own pace. The first step of my plan had to be careful. I didn't want drama or raised voices. I wanted the truth to speak for itself. So I approached family members one by one, choosing moments when the conversation could stay private and calm. I didn't accuse anyone. I simply presented what I had found and let the facts settle. The bank statements were the starting point. I showed how certain transactions didn't match the stories Kyle had told. Quiet questions about missing amounts led to raised eyebrows. Then I brought out the documents related to the wedding, contracts that revealed hidden details Lila had kept from everyone, including decisions she pretended were made by others. Each piece added clarity, and I watched as confusion spread across the faces of those who had trusted them so easily. I didn't push anyone to take sides. I only asked them to look closely. The moment they began connecting the dots on their own, I knew the shift had begun. Kyle's story suddenly looked shaky. Lila's explanations sounded rehearsed. The people they relied on for approval started to question things they once accepted without hesitation. With every quiet conversation, their shine dulled. Relatives who used to admire them began sharing concerns with each other. Long-held assumptions about their honesty started to crumble. I could feel the change in the air, subtle, but powerful. Their image, once polished and admired, now showed cracks. Everything they had built on charm and deception was beginning to fall apart, not because I shouted or stirred chaos, but because honesty had finally entered the room. And this was only the first step. The truth had more to reveal, and I was ready to let it unfold at its own pace. The family reunion seemed like the right moment. Everyone was gathered, relatives who had accepted Kyle without hesitation, people who once looked at me with doubt, and those who had unknowingly repeated the stories he and Lila spread. I waited until conversations had settled and the room grew quiet enough for my voice to carry. I stood, holding the folder I had prepared months earlier. My hands were steady. When I spoke, I didn't raise my voice or accuse blindly. I laid out the truth piece by piece, clear records showing how Kyle had taken advantage of Lila's accounts, agreements he had altered without her knowledge, and lies he had told to hide his behavior. Each document was passed around, letting everyone see with their own eyes. The silence grew heavier with every page. Questions lingered in the air, unspoken but loud enough to shift the atmosphere. People who once believed Kyle's charm now saw something entirely different. The confidence he carried had no place to hide. Lila sat frozen, her expression drained of color. She tried to speak, but the evidence was undeniable. The whispers around her weren't mocking me this time, they were directed at him. Doubt spread across the room as people realized how much he had concealed and how easily he had manipulated their trust. I didn't need to add dramatic words. The truth spoke loudly enough. For the first time, the weight that had pressed on me for so long began to lift. The balance that had always tipped in their favor finally shifted. I watched Kyle's mask slip as the room questioned him. His confidence faded, replaced by something sharp and panicked. And in that moment, I felt a strength I hadn't known for months, a reminder that honesty, when revealed at the right time, carries more power than any insult he ever threw at me. A few days after the reunion, Lila approached me. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by hesitation and unease. She kept her voice low, almost trembling, as she asked me to explain everything. For the first time, I noticed a vulnerability I had never seen before. I didn't respond with anger or accusations. I stayed composed, letting her words and presence settle. She listened as I calmly outlined the facts she already knew but hadn't fully confronted. I showed her how the choices she had made, the whispers, the manipulations, the silent exclusion, had consequences she could no longer ignore. For the first time, she saw clearly what her envy had done. The sister she once competed with had remained patient, strategic, and collected, while she allowed bitterness and jealousy to guide her actions. The weight of the truth pressed on her, and her face reflected the realization that she had underestimated me at every turn. Her marriage, built on lies and deception, began to show cracks. Kyle's arrogance couldn't withstand the scrutiny, and the foundation she had relied on for security now wavered. I didn't gloat or rub it in. I only watched as the person who had tried to erase me confronted the reality she had helped create. Unexpectedly, I felt a sense of closure. This wasn't about punishment, it was about balance. Justice wasn't loud or cruel, it was steady, undeniable, and real. I had reclaimed my voice, my dignity, and my place in the family, and in doing so, I realized that sometimes the most powerful victories come from staying calm and letting the truth speak for itself. That day, I understood that people finally see their own faults when they have no one left to blame but themselves. And Lila's realization marked the turning point I had been waiting for. After the truth came out, Kyle scrambled to defend himself. He spoke quickly, trying to explain away the documents, the inconsistencies, and the proof I had gathered. But his words sounded hollow. The confidence he had carried so easily for months crumbled under the weight of reality. Family members who had once smiled at his charm now looked past it, noticing the gaps in his stories, the signs of deception they had ignored. Every attempt he made to regain trust only highlighted the lies he had told. His presence, once commanding and assured, now felt awkward and fragile. He became a figure of scrutiny and doubt. Conversations that had once been warm and inviting now closed off when he entered the room. People questioned his motives, his honesty, and even his character. Slowly, the social support he had relied on disappeared. Guests avoided him, leaving him alone in the corners of gatherings where he used to thrive. Watching this unfold, I didn't feel anger or glee. The satisfaction I felt was quiet, deep, and steady. It wasn't about humiliating him for the sake of cruelty. It was a proof that actions have consequences and that betrayal cannot hide forever. Seeing him isolated, fumbling for excuses, and realizing that the control he thought he had was gone gave me a sense of balance I hadn't felt in months. Every lie, every manipulation, every betrayal had returned to him in the form of solitude and doubt. That moment confirmed something I had known all along: true power lies not in insults or dominance, but in patience, strategy, and letting the truth take its course. Kyle's isolation was the inevitable result, and I witnessed it quietly, knowing that justice had finally found its place. Once everything had settled, I realized it was time to turn my attention to myself. The chaos and betrayal had taken so much from me, but now I could reclaim the life I wanted. I found a small apartment that felt like a fresh start, a place where I could breathe without the weight of judgment or expectation. Work became my anchor. I discovered a job that challenged me, gave me purpose, and allowed me to build confidence again. Each task completed, each small success reminded me that I was capable and strong. The feeling of achievement, earned through my own effort, was more satisfying than anything I had sought from others. I also began to carefully surround myself with people who truly mattered, friends who valued honesty, loyalty, and kindness. With them, I didn't have to defend myself or explain old stories. I could simply be myself, free from the shadows of envy and manipulation. Every conversation, every laugh shared with people who genuinely cared reminded me of the life I deserved. Slowly, the weight of past betrayals lifted. I no longer carried the sting of humiliation or the pain of exclusion. Instead, I felt grounded, empowered, and in control. The lessons I had learned became my strength rather than a burden. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. I wasn't running from the past or trying to prove anything to Lila or Kyle. I was building a future entirely my own, where respect and trust were earned, and my dignity remained untouchable. Rebuilding my life wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about freedom, self-respect, and finally embracing the person I had always been, beyond the shadows of betrayal. Looking back on everything, I finally understood what mattered most. The weeks of planning, the careful gathering of truths, and the moments of confrontation had all been part of a bigger lesson. The real victory wasn't in proving Kyle or Lila wrong, it was in finding my own strength and reclaiming control over my life. For years, their actions had cast a shadow over me. I had been defined by whispers, assumptions, and their attempts to undermine me. But now, those chains were gone. No longer could their jealousy or cruelty dictate how I felt about myself. I had proven to myself, and to those who mattered, that I could rise above manipulation and betrayal. I walked through my days with a new sense of confidence. Decisions that once felt daunting now felt manageable. Challenges that had seemed overwhelming before now became opportunities to show the person I had become, resilient, composed, and unshakable. I could face the world knowing my worth didn't depend on anyone else's approval. Even when I saw Lila or heard of Kyle's struggles after the exposure, I felt no need for triumph or bitterness. The satisfaction came quietly, like a weight lifted from my shoulders. Their attempts to control or belittle me no longer had power. The family disgrace they had once claimed I wasn't mine to carry anymore, it was theirs. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my peace. I was free to pursue happiness without fear or hesitation. Looking forward, I felt empowered to build relationships, embrace opportunities, and live authentically. Betrayal had once threatened to define me, but in the end, it became the catalyst that revealed my strength. I stepped into my future unafraid, confident, and proud. The loss belonged to them, and my life, my choices, my success, my happiness, belonged entirely to me.